Hello, everyone, and welcome to our PHA interview series where we're interviewing people in our directory and trying to get an idea of the shifting paradigm. Today, we're welcoming Dr. Lynn, a dear friend of mine. And I was going to start out with her kind of introducing herself and talking about a little bit of her expertise. Then we're going to deep dive into kind of her history here. Lynn?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jordan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here with all of you. I am a doctor of Chinese medicine and licensed acupuncturist in the United States. And I'm also an herbalist, a somatic practitioner, a hypnotherapist. So many things I have in my medicine bag. But primarily, when I'm working with clients, I'm working and cultivating a trauma informed care space. Um, and I often work with many different modalities, including traditional Chinese medicine, which is sort of my roots and my foundation of my education. And with that, I've expanded to non invasive therapies, therapies such as Tao trauma work, touch work, somatic work, and healing mixed in with hypnotherapy and all of that goodness. And I specialize in working with women and trauma and psycho emotional and spiritual conditions and presentations. And along with that, I just am a constant internal learner. So I'm always diving into all sorts of medicine, magic, um, and more recently, talking a lot about first aid and Chinese medicine and how we use acupressure and herbalism for that as well. So I'm so happy to be here and to dive into how I got there.
Well, and I'm so happy that you took that because I was like thinking of how I was going to introduce you, and I was like, where do I even start with that introduction? Because as with both of us, I feel like we just have our feet and hands in so many things just because we have so many interests, which I think is a great attribute of both of us. And
Yeah.
that being said, let's kind of take us back. I know that you had, as all we do, kind of a swiveled path to getting to where we are here. I would actually like to go far as back of like undergrad maybe and like where your aim was and what you were looking
Yeah.
to and then how you ended
Mhm.
up so far from maybe that original aim.
That's a great place to start. I'll go back even a little bit further and
Yeah.
just start from when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I used to get sick all the time. I had asthma. I remember my mother saying to me, like, you always get sick. And what my mother would do is she was such a proponent of using not only Western allopathic medicine, but she was a proponent of using home remedies, Chinese herbs, gua sha, cupping, things like that on me. She didn't do so much cupping, but she did a lot of gua sha, which in Chinese medicine we call gua sha, but in Vietnamese we call it gao ya, which is scraping of the coin. Um, and she would talk to me a lot about my body and what my body was doing at the time of releasing heat and releasing wind. And I remember as a kid, I was like, "You're crazy! Like, I don't want to hear about this. I want to be a normal, American kid," and just like wanted to just fully assimilate and blend in. And fast forward, after going to many doctors and seeing many nurses and getting a lot of inhalers and all these things, I thought and I saw being in the hospital was the place that I wanted to be in. I wanted to work in because this is where people heal. That's what I thought as a kid. But then I got to undergrad in my with my degree of pre-nursing and trying to get in nursing
Actually,
school.
this is
Yep.
a part I just want to stop you on fair, just to like
Yep.
point out to the audience and just really exemplify something you said. I feel like I'm so happy you talked about that struggle because I feel like Asian Americans, Caribbean Americans, African Americans, I feel like if we grew up with such a traditional medicine, we almost always deny it and always want to like,
Totally.
push it back and do all those things. And so I think that was just a great place to start. Sorry, go on, but that was
Yeah.
awesome.
No, I definitely did want to push it away. And there was a lot of, I think, shame around my culture, around my traditions. Like I almost felt like I was living a double life. Like I would go home and speak Vietnamese and eat Vietnamese food and had like, that cultural experience at home, but then outside of the home, it was like I was American kid and I would do eat American food and all the
Yeah.
things. And so I had quite like a split life growing up, like lifestyle. And so, fast forward, me going to school for pre nursing, I went through the motions of that, and I was actually interning at a hospital under a few nurses. And I realized very quickly, like, this is not where I'm meant to be. Like under these, in this environment, under these fluorescent lights, like in this sort of setting, like this is not how people heal. And I knew that very deeply, very profoundly, even though at the time, maybe consciously, I didn't know that. But intuitively, through my body sense, I knew that there was something else that was there. And then life happens and I felt really lost at the time because, right, I had like a image of what I thought healing was, and then quickly
Mm,
that image broke and I had to like rewrite and kind of refine myself. And so I went way in the far end, completely opposite to healing and health and wellness and medicine. And I became a cybersecurity project manager, and
mm,
I worked at this fairly large data analytics company and was like, I could do that. I could do, anything a man could do, right? And I was very much like trying to fit in to the society and try to fit into what both my parents wanted for me, which is a stable job, and also what society is looking for, like for you to work a 9 to 5 and you to do that whole thing and climb up the ladder. And knowing my very Capricorn self, I was like, I'm going to do that. And I was the only woman in my department. I was building security operations center in the other side of the world. Like I was doing what a lot of people wanted to do at my age, like in that field, was to work
yeah.
in cybersecurity. And
And
I got
actually,
there.
and I
Yeah.
have actually a question to come out of this because I know for me, I went, so my original degree, I went really, really hard into biochemistry, which I do see as a very, logistics. I see the parallel between that and cybersecurity almost. I know it's a bio
Hmm.
field, but it's very so a masculine dominated field, a very logistics dominated field. And for
Totally.
me personally, I think one of the main reasons I went into that was actually to prove something to myself and to the world that I could do that as well, that I could operate in that paradigm. Because I think the
Yeah.
world expected me to go into, a feminine paradigm, opposite paradigm. That's due to my own like traumas and things. But do you feel like that
Right.
that's why you went so hard into it? Like you're trying to prove to yourself and to the world that you could do something in that dominated field because the other was expected of you?
Definitely.
Fair.
Like I would remember telling people like I can do this job because a man can do this job. I can do
Mm.
anything a man can do. And so with that, there's payoffs. Like for me to step into a very masculine role within myself, I had to sort of like push the feminine aspects of me in the back burner. And in order for me to even operate in that job and be a project manager and like work with the chief executives and all the things, like I had to really step into like, not feeling,
Mm.
not using my intuition, using only my logical mind, using structure and all that, which is there's a time and a place. And the thing is, what we know now as a Chinese medicine practitioner, yin and yang are meant to work together. Like the masculine and the feminine are meant to work in harmony together. And when you only use one aspect of you, the other aspect sort of falls in and almost like it needs nourishment. So I definitely felt that this like lack within myself because I was trying to blend in, because I was doing everything that everyone else wanted of me, but not what I truly wanted in myself,
Mm.
which was I started getting really honest with myself during that time of like, no, I'm meant to help people. And I'm meant to help people in a very intimate, different way than this. And so I ended up actually contracting this very rare amoebic infection in my eye.
Of course you
And
did.
right? Like, how does that happen? And I was living like California. I remember going to the ophthalmologist and they were like, you have contracted some rare amoeba that you only find in Lake Michigan, but you're in California. And it was like this really strange incident that happened. And I kid you not, like my eyes were getting blurry. And
Mm.
like they were like, the ophthalmologist said to me, if you hadn't come in 2 days before, or if you came in 2 days after, you probably would have lost your eyesight. And that
Mm.
was like a huge reality check for me. I think I took like 2 weeks off from my job, that corporate job during that time, just to heal from what was happening. And my mother came down and flew down to support me during that time because I couldn't drive, couldn't do any, like, couldn't really do much because I was about to lose my eyesight. And so when she came down, she actually invited an acupuncturist over to my house. It was this older Chinese man. He brought over a table, brought over, I remember, a dryer, his needles, his medicine bag, and he set up the table and did a session for my mom. And I remember seeing him and being like, oh, I can do what he's doing. Like, I'm supposed to do that. And this light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, I had this inner knowing kind of like aha moment where I was like, that's what I'm supposed to do. There's something about that that like that's drawing me there. And I started asking him questions, and he was like, well, you have to learn about yin and yang, and you have to learn about like heat and wind in the body. And I kid you not, I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I applied to school in San Diego. I got in 2 weeks after that. I moved to San Diego within a month and just started school.
I freaking love every single aspect about that. Not only the synchronicities, but like, an eye altering amoeba basically putting you on your path, which is just such a
Right.
great because even just like the symbology of it affecting your sight, like as we know about like with Chinese medicine right now, like when you're not seeing something clearly, that's very metaphorical for like not seeing something in your life or seeing your path clearly.
Totally.
And so literally
Yeah.
manifested as that.
Like think about the liver. The liver rules the eyes, and the liver's all about vision. It's purpose. It's like what you're really here to do.
Mm.
And I was so disconnected from that when I was in that job. I was so disconnected from like what my true vision here was on earth, and like it was manifesting in my eyes, and it to the point where I could not ignore it anymore.
And
So,
so when you were in school, and I know that with all of us, this changes almost every day probably, but overall speaking, what was your aim from your education? Like, did you have like, oh, I want to open a practice here. Oh, I want to do community health here. Oh, or was your aim kind of fluid throughout your schooling? Because I think that's another important like aspect for
well,
people.
I think this is a great question because I always tell people who reach out to me and they're like, I want to go to Chinese medicine school. And I'm like, first of all, you need to know your why. Like,
Mm.
your why is probably the most important thing that you need to know. It's going to be your pillar throughout the entire program. And I'm sure you know this too,
It's
Jordan,
gonna be
because
your
you went
mantra that you're gonna be saying to you under your breath when you want to
exactly.
quit.
When you're in like points three and you're learning like all these herbal formulas, you're going to be like, you have to remind yourself why you got into the program and why you decided to learn Chinese medicine. For me, it was a very clear, like, I want to help people. And this feels like the avenue to do that. And it was like I was following that deeper calling. And it was always like I meant to help people in a different way, in a new way, in a deeper way. And that was sort of my mantra. It was like, there's something here. There's something deep here for me, a deep medicine. And I always loved like health and wellness and all of that good stuff. So I was just always drawn to it. And so when I started my first class in Chinese medicine school, it was like the foundations of Chinese medicine and learning about wind, and learning about heat and cold and how it affects the body. Something also clicked in me, and I started thinking about that kid who would get sick all the time. And my mom would tell me, you have wind and heat in the body. And so when I'm doing gua sha on you, it's releasing that. It clicked to me like, oh, right, this is like another language that I already somehow know in my body
Mm.
because I was taught this when I was young. And this is really common in like Vietnamese and Chinese culture. Like medicine is just embodied. It's embedded in the culture. It's embedded in lifestyle. Like life cultivation is just a part of life. It's not just like this side thing that you do. It's like in everything. It's in the food you eat. It's in the medicine that you take every day. It's like your daily walk around the city is like you stop and get
Yeah.
acupuncture, you know?
Well,
So it's
and I
yeah.
think growing up, and just to cut you off real quick, and I think that people think that American culture has none of that, and I think that we need to have this reminded. There's whispers of it everywhere. We just don't really see it or look at that. And I grew up in upstate New
Mhm.
York, and so we had the extremes with weather, and it's just common sayings. When it gets a little cold outside, you might get sick. When we have dampness in the air, your joints might hurt. These things are
Mhm.
actually present. We just like aren't cultivating them enough. And so that's why I love the
Mhm.
paradigm of Chinese medicine Because when I can give somebody that lens, I think that they can further see in whatever culture or background they're coming from where those ideas actually already do exist. And I think for you, it's
Mhm.
beautiful that you actually had that literal paradigm. But I feel like even for someone who doesn't, it's still there somewhere
Yeah.
at least.
No, you're right. I mean, I think each culture and each place has um, a sense of what happens when you're in an environment. Like, for example, I'm in Costa Rica, and like when you know, you can sense when the rain is coming. Like you just feel it. Like there's more dampness in the air. Like the the vibe changes. Like you can tell. And so, I think that as humans, we've evolved with nature for so long that we have those kind of intuitive body senses, like sort of
Yeah.
animal instincts that actually gives us so much wisdom. And so when I went to Chinese medicine school, I learned it completely changed my whole paradigm of understanding the body and understanding wellness. And that the way I was taught, or the way I saw it happen in hospitals was like, oh, that right, that doesn't align with me. Chinese medicine, in some ways, aligns so deeply with me because it's getting to the deeper root cause of what's happening. It's asking, you're kind of like an investigator. Like sometimes I feel when I'm working with clients, I'm like, I'm investigating you. Like I'm in forensics and I'm like figuring out what's happening, what's the root cause of what's happening. And I feel like that's transformed in so many ways now that I'm in practice. But going throughout Chinese medicine school, I learned such a different way of looking at the body, that actually the body is this whole picture and we're made up of many different systems that work all together. Versus in Western medicine, it's very reductionistic. You have one doctor for, you have a podiatrist, then you have a hormone doctor, then you have like a gynecologist. It's like
Yeah.
all these different parts. Whereas Chinese medicine's like, you have all of this, and we're trying to understand as a Chinese medicine practitioner how all of these parts work together and to pinpoint what parts imbalance and maybe not doing what it's supposed to do. And so I love that because I do that so much in my practice, and I use that framework and paradigm in looking at life now. Like I think what Chinese medicine school really also taught me was not only about health and wellness, but like how to understand life. Like, I
Yeah.
wonder if that was the case for you too, Jordan. Like, if it also changed the paradigm of your
W-
life.
Well, and it's so hard unless someone learns this medicine, and of course, I feel like we're doing like a infomercial for Chinese medicine, which I'm okay with. But that being
Yep,
said,
yep.
because it is awesome, but it's just one of those things where like the medicine is so beautiful because it's applicable to any system. Because it is just
Hmm.
understanding how systems work. It's not even understanding how the body works. It's just understanding how a system works. And
Yeah.
macro, micro, any type of system has some, correlated themes that apply everywhere. So I always say I can view politics from a Chinese medicine lens. I can view how weather works from a Chinese medicine lens. I can view relationships from a Chinese medicine lens because it's just understanding how systems work together. It is
Hmm.
such a great lens and basis for anybody to have, just simply for that reason. And I think that's also why you and I are both passionate about Chinese medicine education, because it's not
Hmm.
just something that can help with your health, which is an incredibly important part of it, but it can just help for you bettering every aspect of your life and finding the
Yeah.
balance there, starting with the yin and yang of things. And I
Yep.
think that a good place to take this conversation, because I think we're already headed and leaded there, is we really want this series to highlight the how and the why people are doing what they're doing and not stepping into or kind of going off of mainstream. So I think a beautiful part of your story that I know is immediately following school, I feel like you had a little bit of a struggle between what you were going to actually do, where you were going to live, how that was going to manifest and look. So kind of can you take us there and tell us what was in
Yeah.
your brain at those times?
I definitely struggled a lot, I think, after graduating, and I don't think that's an uncommon thing. I think there's a lot of, like, once you're like a really full-on student and going from like, oh, I'm going and like starting my practice, there's a lot happening in that space. And so I definitely struggled during that time to just like find my footing, find where I'm getting settled. And to talk to you more about that, I think I have to go a little bit back
Yeah.
into the last year of school, which is this was during COVID, and everything went online for Chinese medicine school. And I remember saying, like, I can do this anywhere. I can take my classes anywhere. And so that ended up leading me to go to Costa Rica. And when I got to Costa Rica, I was traveling here by myself for 3 months. And I always tell people I never left because there's something in me that was like, I fell in love with the climate. I fell in love with just being here, how I felt when I was here, just the accessibility to like fresh fruits and like fruits that you literally pick from the tree. Like you could pick a papaya off the tree and eat it, and it's like the best thing that you've ever eaten. It's like it's just like the abundance and the amount of yin that's here was just like I'd never been like exposed to that in my life,
Yeah.
because I lived most of my life in California and like maybe different places around the world, but not ever in a tropical climate. And then it clicked to me like, okay, this is where I want to be. This is where I feel the best. And when I graduated the program, I decided, okay, well, where do I want to be in the world? I want to start with that. It's like, where do I feel like my lifestyle is feels the best and feels most aligned? And I think I want to start there was like taking care of myself, kind of remembering myself as a human, because I think when you go to through Chinese medicine school, you just like have to be such in study mode that you forget this kind of like being like a normal person sometimes.
Yeah, not studying. I can remember like being out to dinner by like 3 weeks into acupuncture schools. I did schooling back to back, and I was like studying the menu, and I was like trying to memorize it, like come up with new mind. It's like Jordan, you don't. This is not something you're gonna be tested on. So you have to almost like get
Yes.
out of your brain constantly trying to consume and do those things for sure.
Totally. I mean, I can't even tell you how many boxes of flashcards that I have of herbs and points and like that I just recently got rid of because I'm like, okay, time to clear some things. And yeah, you're just in that mindset. And if you're in that mindset for like 4 or 5 years, it's just like ingrained in you. So I took some time and I actually left to go to Vietnam for 3 months after I graduated, and that was really for me to reconnect with my culture, to connect with Vietnamese traditions and the language. That was a huge awakening for me of like what I really wanted in my life, how I envisioned my practice. I really took time to do like deep soul searching before I even started my practice. And then with that, I had to I came back to Costa Rica and I was like, oh, the way in which I want to practice is actually outside of the paradigm of how usually acupuncturists practice. So
Mm.
not only was I practicing a medicine that was outside of Western healthcare paradigm, but I was also practicing outside of how most other acupuncturists practiced, if that makes sense.
Well,
Yeah.
and to pause you here, and I think something that you did that, again, we're trying to highlight so much is you did like the exact opposite of what the paradigm is doing now. You usually go from school and are so pressured to get a job, so pressured to perform, so pressured to go out and do that you don't think of
Mhm.
like, it doesn't matter what if about my personal needs, it doesn't matter about where I'm living. I just need to get a job and just need to go. And then people, 5, 10 years later down try to have that same talk, but then they're stuck in this rut and this cycle and
Yeah.
all of these things. And so I
Yeah.
think it's so beautiful that you did that and figured that out prior to. Otherwise, you'd
Yeah.
be having this, conversation with yourself, 5 or 10 years
Yeah.
down the road.
I definitely feel like I face the deep conflict head on. And I do want to say I'm so grateful to my past self, like that version of me that worked in corporate, because I was able to save enough money for me to have now. Like I
Yeah.
still am like benefiting from that. And so when people ask me like how do you do all these things and how are you traveling? It's like it's because I saved enough money during that corporate time. And so everything happens for a reason. I
Yeah.
truly feel that. Like I was in that for a reason to learn a deep lesson, but also to financially support myself. And so fast forward, I came back to Costa Rica and I said, okay, I'm going to practice. But how do I want my practice to look like? And what do I want that to feel like? And how do I want to be in service? And who do I want to serve? And I wanted to be really clear with that. Something that I always talk to myself or always imagine is I say, I'm supposed to be helping somebody who is maybe a few steps behind me, like who's maybe on a similar path, have gone through similar things to me, because I have the tools, the know of like how to navigate some of the things that my past self went through, right?
Yeah.
Kind of rewriting the paradigm, the patriarchal paradigm of like you have to be in a certain way, you have to blend in, you can't express your intuition, all those things. I find myself now helping people remember your body's wisdom through this Chinese medicine paradigm, through this lens of Chinese medicine. But not only that, there's like these pieces of intuition that I use in practice that I also have been like guiding people in. And there's so many other parts to that. There's a lot of trauma healing work that I do with my clients now, which is honestly some of the most deep, profound spaces I hold for my clients. And the thing is like, I always tell people, like, you can only go as deep as you take yourself. So I've done
Mhm.
so much of that work on myself. I've done a lot of the inner child reparenting work. I've done a lot of like this deep trauma work in the midst of Chinese medicine school and even after that. And so that really helped me set up now what my practice is like. I would also say a big part of my practice now is doing Tao of trauma work, which I studied under my teacher, Elaine Duncan, who created the Tao of Trauma. It's an amazing book. And you think of it as like this East and West blended uh, paradigm and toolbox and techniques that use the polyvagal theory, somatic experiencing, blended with Chinese medicine.
Mhm.
And so I use a lot of that now to help people find regulation in themselves, to help people titrate into doing trauma healing, because I find a lot now that trauma is a glass ceiling that we can't see, but is in each one of us.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this kind of marker that you keep bumping against, that you're like, why do I keep making progress and taking 3 steps back?
Yeah.
And so I help clients really work through, okay, what are those blocks and how do we clear those blocks, and do it with this foundation of Chinese medicine. Because again, Chinese medicine can help us understand that, okay, my chi, there's energetic stagnation in a certain
Mhm.
place, and this is how I can move it with not only that Tao of trauma work, but with like holistic health education. I'm so passionate about that. And I really feel like at this moment, that's a lot of what I do now, is like creating content and creating webinars and creating like educational material and courses for people to just learn about Chinese medicine, like apply these self-healing tools to yourself, because that's the ultimate empowerment. Like when you know what to do in a certain situation, if you have a headache, if you have nausea, like which points to press, which herbs you can use with, which
Mhm.
qigong methods you can use, which like different principles in Chinese medicine that can help guide us in our life. I do a lot of that work now. And I guess that's a really long way of saying that I do work outside the paradigm. But
Yeah.
I've built that because this is what serves me. Like I'm here to be an educator and also empower people with these tools. So,
No, and it definitely sounds like you're paving your own path, and you clearly
yeah.
highlighted your online work remotely with people and clients and stuff like that, and how you're
Yep.
focusing on education as well. I think I'd kind
Hmm.
of like to wrap up here with two other like areas I know you're working in. I know you
Yeah.
do have some like boots on the ground practice as well, so I'd love a
Yeah.
quick like brief like just explanation of how or why or what you're doing there. And I also
Hmm.
know that you've done events and things like that, and kind of stepping into that a little bit here too, so we can talk more about what you're actually doing in person as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I can start with my practice here in person, Costa Rica. So um, I've primarily transitioned to a more non-invasive type of treatment of Chinese medicine. So that looks like using the Tao of trauma work, using my hands as a transmitter of qi rather than needles. And that's something I've been really connecting with lately, is like, how do we use what we have that's accessible, our hands, our
Mm,
intention, our chi, our life force, all those things. And so I primarily practice a Japanese meridian therapy style of of acupuncture, which is non-invasive. And in addition to that, I focus a lot on moxibustion. So I use a very fine grade of mugwort and apply it directly on the points. And it's like moxa is magic. I am just in love with moxa. And what's beautiful about moxa is you can teach other people how to do moxa on themselves. So I could teach the other person on the other side of the world how to do moxa on themselves. Like that's to me the most powerful ways to like share medicine. And I also do not only the Tao of trauma, but I do a lot of hypnotherapy. More recently in my practice, I've been doing a lot of like ancestral mediumship, calling in ancestral ancestors and doing a lot of ancestral healing along with like some constellation work and parts therapy and all those things. So my practice has been really transforming into supporting people on a psycho emotional spiritual level. It's always been grounded in that because when I was in Chinese medicine school I was like, great, I know how to treat the digestive issues and the diabetes and the low back pain, but like for me, I was always interested in like what's the deeper rooted emotional patterns that are blocking this person and how can we get to the where all of that started, the origins of that. And oftentimes it starts in childhood or even in our ancestry. And so I really worked with people in that space and I love being in that space. And one of the things I recently did was I worked at a festival, a women's gathering or a conference. It's sort of a blend of those things called Temple of Belonging. And I was the licensed acupuncturist there holding acupuncture sessions. So I was doing acupuncture and doing Tao of trauma work on the clients. And that was such a profound experience. I did that in Oregon and it was just like meeting the people and holding space for them in person to me is something that you really can't explain, but is such a profound experience of like true presence. When you're really with somebody in like a difficult moment in their life, it's just like humbling and it's profoundly rewarding in so many ways to see transformation happen in real time. And so that was such a beautiful experience. I not only did that, but I was also facilitating a 3-hour workshop all about return to yin, which is sort of this reclamation of yin in this hyper yang, excess yang world that we live in. And we see that happening not only on the individual, which on an individual level, we see yin deficiency, which happens when there's excess yang. I saw that as a pattern in school, in clinics, in my practice now, and people I talk to, that people are running on this yin deficiency, not having enough inner resources. And so having things like hormone imbalance and early menopause and infertility, like all those parts are indicating that there's this yin deficiency. But not only that, like I'm looking at the society at large and that there's high amounts of inflammation in society, in politics, in the environment. We're seeing the oceans rise and the forest burning, right? That is a symptom of a yin deficiency when there's too much heat because there's a yang excess. And so I've
And we're
been
also
really
seeing wind, like earthquakes and literal wind. Like we're seeing all these Chinese medicine elements out of balance due to that, for sure.
yeah. And so my mission right now is building Return to Yin, which is this movement about reclaiming, re-honoring yin, respecting yin within ourselves and in the environment, because those two things are not separate. We're not separate from the environment. We're not separate from the society and from what's happening. And so for us to re-honor yin in ourselves on many levels and to sit with, okay, this is what's happening. There's excess yang, there's inflammation. So how do we support that and find a balance of both yin and yang in ourselves and in the world at large? And so that's a big mission of mine right now, is spreading that movement, because I truly find that people are desiring that. People want more yin in their lives. They want more pause and slowness and systems that support that and environments that support that, right? So I'm just Yeah, just really humbled and grateful to be able to be sharing that message, not only online, but in person. And it just feels really good and just also feels like a really big homecoming and a full circle to
Yeah.
me as a young kid, learning from my mother on these principles. And now I get to teach that to other people. So it's really fun.
Well, and I think the best reason why you're such a good advocate and facilitator for this return to yin, this return to slowness, and everything you're speaking of here is that although you're so good at embodying these things, you're not a purely yin being. You're a very yang being. You're very like so
Totally.
you know what it's like to be in the opposite paradigm, you know? And I think that
Yeah.
what makes your perspective so well because it'd be one thing if you were just naturally this slow yin feminine embodiment 24/7 your entire life. And the answer
Hmm.
is from at least what I've seen, you weren't. And I think that that's really, really important to be able to facilitate someone in this. You have to be able to understand what it's like to be in yang in order to guide someone in that direction. So,
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I'm still like that. Like I'm still so young. Like it's a practice and a devotion for me to be like, I have to schedule in yin in my schedule because then that's when I'll because we like think about this. We schedule our meetings, we schedule our clients, we schedule all of our like business things, but we don't actually schedule our like downtime. We don't schedule
mm,
our creativity. We don't schedule our intuition practice, right? Like, can we then switch the paradigm to say, like, these structures can then support not only yang, the activity, the pushing your energy out, getting things to happen, but it can also support our inner nourishment, our
yeah.
slowing down, our pause, our restoration. Because I really feel like that's what people need now is this deep, deep restoration that then becomes the anchor for yang.
Well, no, and it's funny too because structures and schedules and all of these things are such a young concept, but we're using a
Mm-hmm.
young concept to support yin, and I think that's another important thing. I'm happy you highlighted is that people think that
Yeah.
it is a move from one extreme to another, and again, no, that's the paradigm we're trying to break. We're not saying it's one or the other. We're saying it's a
Mhm.
fusion of both, where they support each other, can work with
Mhm.
each other, and can continually feed each other. I mean, that is
Yeah.
the basic of Taoistic principle in yin and yang too is that they
Yeah.
both have to exist, be in balance,
Right.
and feed each other for a system to work. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you one last thing. I posted something recently that was like, it was a Substack post that said, "The future is a yin world. The future is a mothering world. The future is a care-centered world." And I had multiple people, maybe 80% of the people say, "Oh my God, yes, this is great. We want this." And then I had 20% of the people say, "This is horrible. We don't want this. This is not the world we want." And I had to sit with that because I was like, that's really interesting that 20% of the people actually didn't want yin, right? Didn't want like a yin centered world. And I think to really clarify that when you're talking about yin and yang, they're not separate from each other. So when I'm saying return to yin, I'm also saying may yang also return. May yang, the healthy form of yang, come into balance with yin so we can live in a more healthy, balanced world. Like when we're talking about anything in terms of yin and yang and like finding balance, it's always because yin is interconnected with yang. So if I nourish yin, that yang is going to actually cool down. So there's no separation between yin and yang. And like if someone who is a really yin being, like sometimes they actually don't need more yin. What they actually need is
it's a
yang,
lot of yang. Yeah.
right? Like is to actually use their voice and to like get action and get movement. And that's also clarity and discernment that we need to have when we're working with these principles or looking at our lives is like, actually, let me check in with my own personal desire and need and like where I'm at with yin and yang and me and what how I need to shift with that, how I need to dance with yin and yang, because that's different for every single person. So,
No,
Yeah.
I think that was a beautiful spot to end on too, because I think that that was kind of what we're trying to encompass here. And I just really, really, really love how your life's journey, your exploration of being young, really exemplifies everything we're looking for here at the PHA. It is this return. And I think that's a conversation we've had. People are thinking that the PHA's mission is to return to, just bring in this strong, defined feminine and, push out the system that exists. And no, it's
Hmm.
exactly what you said. It's, refining the balance in the system that's processing, because no one can deny
Exactly.
that we're incredibly out of balance. And so I think phrasing is
Yeah.
important. And us also, when we do get triggered by something, addressing and sitting with a why there, which I feel like you did so well. And so I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. And I think that's a perfect spot to end. I know that people will be hearing a lot more from Dr. Lin, because I feel like you're just in such adjacent spaces. And I'm so happy to call you my friend. So I think that's a great place to end.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you.